AITA for pretending to be a ghost to scare my noisy neighbors. Now they're selling their house. This might be the pettiest thing I've ever done, but I swear I had no other options left. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood where most people keep to themselves. I moved here about 2 years ago with the hope of finally getting some peace and quiet after years of noisy apartment living. For a while it was great, birds chirping, kids playing during the day, silence after 9 p.m. Until the Johnsons moved in next door. The Johnsons are a family of 5, but you'd think they were running a nightclub and a daycare center out of their house simultaneously. Their teenage sons blasted music every night, sometimes until 2 or 3 in the morning. Their younger kids screamed constantly in the backyard like they were being chased by bears. And don't get me started on their dog, a German shepherd that barked at literally everything, passing cars, squirrels, falling leaves. I tried everything reasonable. I knocked politely. I left notes. I even brought over cookies once as a peace offering to discuss the noise. Every time, they gave me some version of, "Oh, we didn't realize, sorry," followed by no change in behavior. After 6 months of dealing with this and getting maybe 4 hours of sleep a night, I finally started logging noise levels. I called the HOA and even filed a couple of noise complaints. Nothing changed. They either didn't care or genuinely thought I was being dramatic. But one night, when I was woken up by what sounded like a full drum line performance at 1:30 a.m., I lost it. And that's when the idea hit me, if I couldn't reason with them, maybe I could scare them. I should mention here that the Johnsons are, ironically, very superstitious. I only know this because during one of our brief conversations, the wife mentioned how her husband refuses to walk under ladders or leave mirrors uncovered at night because of bad energy. I remembered that. So I started planning. I didn't want to cause any real harm, just nudge them into being quieter. Or maybe, if I was lucky, make them leave altogether. The plan was simple. I would pretend the house, or more specifically, their backyard, was haunted. I figured if they were already jumpy about superstitions, it wouldn't take much to convince them something paranormal was going on. So I ordered a cheap wireless speaker online, found a collection of spooky sounds, low whispers, soft moaning, faint crying, and started my nightly haunting campaign. I'd hide the speaker near their backyard fence and trigger sounds from my phone at random intervals late at night. I also used an old bedsheet and some fishing line to create the illusion of a floating figure in the shadows. At first, it was just for laughs. I'd see their lights flick on at 2 a.m. and hear the dad shouting, "Did you hear that?" I didn't expect it to actually work. But then things escalated. Within a week, things started to shift. The noisy backyard parties stopped abruptly. Their teenagers, who used to loiter out there with their Bluetooth speakers and booming bass, now scurried inside before sunset. I'd catch glimpses of them from my upstairs window, whispering and glancing nervously at the backyard like something was watching them. I felt a little guilty, but not enough to stop. I escalated the theatrics gradually. Some nights, I'd place a motion-activated recorder near their back porch that played muffled sobbing when triggered. Other times, I'd flicker a flashlight from the bushes or make soft scratching sounds along the fence. I even scattered a few cryptic chalk symbols on the sidewalk between our houses. Honestly, I was having way too much fun with it. It became my weird little nightly routine: brush teeth, set haunting equipment, go to bed. Then the rumors started. One morning, I overheard one of the teenage sons talking to someone in their driveway. "Dude, swear to God, it's haunted. I saw something in the yard last night. It floated, I'm serious." I nearly burst out laughing. Another day, the mom was outside on the phone, pacing nervously and saying something like, "The previous owner didn't mention anything about spiritual disturbances." That made me feel a little bad. But the quiet nights that followed were so worth it. I thought I'd stop once things calmed down. But the Johnsons were persistent believers. Instead of brushing it off as coincidence or a prank, they leaned into the supernatural explanation hard. They called a priest one weekend. I watched as he walked around their property sprinkling holy water and muttering prayers. A couple days later, I saw a truck pull into their driveway with the words, "Paranormal Investigations, Tri-State Area," plastered on the side. I kid you not, they hired ghost hunters. Meanwhile, I was just some petty neighbor giggling into my cereal each morning, knowing I was the one behind the disturbances. I didn't mean for it to spiral like that, but it was like watching a reality TV show unfold in real life. My petty prank had become their full-blown nightmare. But then came the for sale sign. I woke up one Friday morning, opened my blinds, and there it was, planted right in their front yard. For sale by owner. I nearly choked on my coffee. They were moving. I thought maybe it was a coincidence, maybe they were relocating for work or something. But later that day, I overheard them talking to a neighbor at the mailbox. "It's just not worth it. We haven't slept well in months. The kids are scared, and we feel watched. The energy here is off. We need to start fresh somewhere else." I was stunned. They were really leaving. Because of me. And while part of me felt victorious, another part of me wondered if I'd gone too far. Was I the jerk for orchestrating this whole fake haunting? Or was this just karma doing its thing in a bedsheet and spooky soundtrack? The realization hit me later that night when I looked out the window and saw the Johnsons, parents and both kids, huddled together around a fire pit in their backyard, quietly talking with flashlights close at hand. There was no music, no laughter, no crowd of teenagers. Just a weird, eerie silence. I'd wanted peace and quiet, and I had it now, but it felt like I had bulldozed my way into it rather than earned it. I started questioning whether I'd crossed a line. What began as harmless, even justified mischief had clearly spiraled. I wasn't expecting them to actually sell their house, I just wanted them to stop blaring Post Malone at 1 a.m. and throwing backyard beer pong tournaments while I tried to sleep for my early shifts. Maybe a few jump scares and a little paranoia were called for. But real estate transactions? That wasn't in the plan. And then I got caught, sort of. It happened the following weekend. Their son, the older one, maybe 17, was out back again, this time with his phone pointed directly at the woods. I had no clue he was filming. I did one of my usual flashlight tricks from behind the fence, not knowing he'd rigged a motion detector to trigger his camera. He caught the flicker and my shadow moving behind some bushes. The next day, I overheard him showing it to his dad. "See? There's someone back there. That's not a ghost. That's a person." Oh. I thought it was over. I thought they'd march right over, accuse me, maybe call the cops. But they didn't. Instead, things went quiet again. For a couple days, no one came outside, no lights were on past 9 p.m., and the curtains in their windows stayed drawn. I was getting paranoid. Maybe they did know it was me and were planning some revenge. Maybe they'd report me anonymously. Or worse, maybe they were documenting everything and I'd end up on some neighborhood watch list as local psycho who faked a haunting. But then something unexpected happened. The mom came over. I opened the door to find her standing there, holding a plate of brownies. She looked exhausted, but polite. "Hey," she said, "I just wanted to say we're sorry if we've been disruptive. I know our boys can be loud, and I think this whole place just got off on the wrong foot with you. We're actually planning to move. We just need something quieter." I didn't know what to say. She didn't accuse me. She didn't even hint that she suspected anything. She was kind, more than I deserved. I took the brownies with a mumbled thank you, feeling like absolute garbage. I hadn't just scared off my noisy neighbors, I'd possibly freaked out an entire family to the point that they were giving up their home. And yet I didn't confess. I just stood there awkwardly and nodded like some innocent bystander. In the days that followed, they started packing up. The "for sale" sign changed to "under contract." I kept expecting a final confrontation, or maybe a note slipped under my door saying, "We know it was you." But nothing came. Just a few awkward waves, a forced smile here and there, and then, moving trucks. They were really leaving. Because of the ghost I invented. And that's when the guilt started growing louder than their parties ever were. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I walked past their driveway and saw another box being loaded into the truck, I felt like I was stealing something from them. Not their peace, mine, not justice, but cruelty. I'd wanted them to feel what I felt, tired, frustrated, ignored, but not this. Not uprooted. And yet, I didn't come clean. I just couldn't. The shame burned, but so did the fear. What would they do if they knew? Would they press charges? Could they sue? I'd used no trespassing signs, didn't break into their property, didn't damage anything, but still, harassment is a real charge. And even if they didn't go legal, I'd forever be that neighbor, not just to them, but to everyone in the neighborhood. Word spreads. HOA drama spreads like wildfire. Then came the open house weekend. It was surreal watching strangers walk through the Johnsons' home, smiling, sipping lemonade, imagining their own loud teenagers in the yard. I felt like I was watching the aftermath of a secret war only I knew was fought. I stood at my window, curtain drawn just slightly, watching silently like a ghost myself. Was this what I wanted? And then, I heard a knock at the door. It was one of the prospective buyers, a woman in her 40s, well-dressed, friendly, holding a clipboard. Hi. Sorry to bother. We're looking at the Johnsons' place and just wanted to ask a few neighbors what the area's like. Is it quiet? Friendly. I stared at her for a moment too long. My throat felt dry. I nodded. Yeah, it's quiet now, she smiled. Good. The last neighborhood we lived in had teenagers racing motorcycles at night. I almost laughed out loud at the irony. She thanked me and walked away, and I closed the door and leaned against it, the silence roaring in my ears. Later that night, I sat down and typed out a long confession on Reddit, under a throwaway account that I just needed to get it off my chest. I didn't name names or cities or specifics. But I laid it out, how I pretended to be a ghost, how it spiraled, how I couldn't stop once it started, how I didn't think it would end like this, and people responded. Some thought it was hilarious, they had it coming. Someone wrote that "you're a genius," said another. But a few others hit deeper. This is a little darker than you think it is. You manipulated people into fearing their home. I knew they were right. So I made one last decision. One that felt small, maybe pointless, but necessary for my own peace of mind. I went over to their mailbox, a few days before their moving date, and slipped in an envelope. No name, no return address, just a note. It said, "I'm sorry, you didn't imagine the ghost. That I was just someone who couldn't sleep and got carried away. You didn't deserve to feel unsafe. I hope your next home is everything you want it to be. I'll never do anything like that again." I don't know if they ever read it. I don't know if it helped. But the house sold. The truck left. And the new family moved in just last week. They're quiet, too quiet. The silence felt eerie now. Not peaceful, empty. I used to fantasize about this exact moment. No more late-night yelling, no more engines revving, no more nerve-grating TikTok music blaring through the open windows at midnight. But now that the Johnsons were gone, I found myself listening to the silence with a strange kind of guilt. Almost like the quiet was accusing me. I tried to move on. Mowed the lawn. Took walks. Got back to reading in the evenings. But something was different now. It was like I'd exposed a side of myself I didn't know existed, or maybe didn't want to admit was there. Someone petty. Passive-aggressive. Willing to push people over the edge just to get a little peace and quiet. And then came the twist I didn't expect. About a week after the new neighbors moved in, I got a knock on my door again. This time it was a teenager, maybe 17, tall, lanky, wearing headphones around his neck and an apologetic smile. He held a small box in his hands. Hey. My mom said I should introduce myself. I'm Jake. We just moved in next door. I nodded, awkwardly. Hi, welcome to the neighborhood. He handed me the box. She baked banana bread. Says she hopes it's not too dry. I took it, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. I looked over at their driveway. A modest sedan, a basketball hoop already mounted above the garage. A mother, from the glimpse I'd caught through the window, probably early 40s, tidy and put together. There was no thumping bass. No shouted phone calls on the porch. Maybe things would be different this time. Jake hesitated a second longer before saying, also I know this is weird, but the realtor mentioned something kind of funny during the tour. Said the last owners thought the house was haunted. I nearly choked on air. Oh. Yeah. They said it got so bad they brought in some kind of medium. My mom thinks that stuff is hilarious. I forced a smile. That's funny, yeah. He shrugged. Anyway. If you ever hear weird noises from our place, it's probably just me dropping dumbbells or something. I lift at night sometimes. I exhaled slowly. Thanks for the heads up. Jake smiled and headed back to his house, leaving me with a box of banana bread and a million thoughts swirling in my head. I stood there for a while, looking across the yard, wondering if I'd gotten what I wanted, or if I'd just traded one set of problems for another layer of self-loathing. The ghost I pretended to be had vanished from their lives. But it still lingered in mine. Days passed, and while the noise levels from the new neighbors were tolerable, nothing like the Johnsons, there was this creeping feeling I couldn't shake. A kind of paranoia. Every time a door creaked open, every time the floorboards in my house popped at night, my brain whispered, you started something. You stirred something up in yourself that you can't just quiet down now. I found myself compulsively checking their windows, listening to their patterns, when they left, when they came home, who visited. It wasn't even about noise anymore. I'd lived through chaos so long, my nervous system didn't know what to do with calm. I started expecting something to go wrong. And I hated that part of me. That part that looked for problems just to feel normal. Then one morning I got a letter in the mailbox. No return address. Just a handwritten note on cheap stationery. I know what you did. They weren't good neighbors, but neither are you. I froze. There was no signature. No other clue. Just that one sentence. I sat on my porch rereading it 5 times in a row, heartbeat galloping in my chest. Someone knew. Someone knew. Was it one of the Johnsons? Did they figure it out? Or worse, did one of the other neighbors catch me sneaking around in that dumb sheet? Had I been seen dragging the speaker through the bushes at 2 a.m.? I looked around the street. The same middle-aged guy jogging with his Labrador. A woman watering her plants. Everything looked normal. Calm. But that letter wrecked me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying every step I took during my ghost operation, trying to remember if I'd slipped up, if there'd been a camera, a motion light, anything that could have caught me. The memory of the night the Johnsons screamed themselves hoarse came flooding back, except now, it felt less funny and more deranged. My husband, who I hadn't told about the prank, noticed I was spiraling. You okay? He asked one night, sitting beside me on the couch. I hesitated. Do you think people can go too far, even if their intentions weren't evil? He raised an eyebrow. What did you do? I said nothing. He didn't press. But that silence between us hung there like the weight of a truth too big to say out loud. Because I didn't just scare some neighbors. I'd turned into someone I wasn't sure I recognized. Update 2. So here's the update. Things didn't stay quiet for long, internally or externally. That letter was only the beginning. A few days after I got it, my doorbell rang while I was still in pajamas, cup of coffee halfway to my mouth. I peeked through the peephole and saw a man in his 50s, wearing khakis and a tucked-in polo shirt. clipboard in hand. Realtor. I opened the door cautiously, and he introduced himself as Marcus, a local real estate agent. I just wanted to drop by and let you know the Johnson house is officially on the market, he said with a professional smile. We'll be hosting showings this weekend, so you might see a few unfamiliar cars around. I kept a straight face and nodded like this was all new information. Oh, wow. That's fast. Yeah. Owners are pretty eager to sell. They said something about the neighborhood not being what they thought it'd be. I smiled politely. My stomach twisted. They hadn't said it was ghosts. Or haunting. Or even strange neighbors. But I could feel it in my bones, that decision to sell was born that night. The night I channeled my inner poltergeist and screamed like a banshee through their vents. Still, it was the letter that haunted me more. And it didn't stop there. 2 nights after Marcus visited, I came home from work and found my trash can tipped over. Nothing stolen. Just, disturbed. Like someone had pawed through it for evidence. The following week, a package arrived for me. No return address again. Just a small box with a white bedsheet inside. Neatly folded. I dropped it like it had burned me. My husband came running and I finally cracked. I told him everything. From the noises, the sleepless nights, the plan, the fake ghost, the speakers, the sound app, even the dumb whispering through the floorboards. He stared at me for a long time. Then he started laughing. Not in a cruel way. More in that, oh my God, what kind of sitcom did I marry into, kind of way. He called me a lunatic. I accepted it. But then I showed him the letter. And the sheet. And he stopped laughing. That's not funny, he said. That's creepy. Now we were both spiraling. We debated calling the police but didn't. What would we say? Hey, someone knows I faked being a ghost and now they're sending me linens. Yeah, no. That wasn't going to fly. Instead, we started locking every door and window. We put a camera on the porch. We slept with the bedroom door shut, which we'd never done before. The thing was, I'd started this whole mess because I wanted peace. Now I was sleeping with a flashlight under my pillow. The next weekend, the open house happened. Cars lined the street, people walked in and out of the Johnsons' place like it was a parade. I watched from behind my curtains like the world's most paranoid neighbor. I expected someone to knock on my door, or for the couple to come yell at me again, or even for the cops to show up with some bizarre noise harassment complaint. But none of that happened. Instead, what I noticed was this: whenever the Johnsons were talking to prospective buyers on the lawn, they avoided mentioning anything about the houses, character or unique sounds. They just looked eager to pass it off like a hot potato. Their realtor did most of the talking. They stood stiffly, hands clasped, eyes darting every time a wind chime rang. That night, the house was dark again. No music, no slamming doors, no arguing, and no ghost. I felt relieved. But also anxious. Like something was still looming. That's when the second letter came. This one was handwritten. Still anonymous. No return address. The handwriting was small, slanted, and jittery like whoever wrote it was nervous. It read, "You might have scared them. But you didn't scare me. I know what you did. And if you ever do it again, I'll make sure you know what real fear feels like." There was no signature. No date. Just that. My hands went cold. I read it twice, then 3 times, trying to recognize the handwriting or figure out who else could possibly know. My husband wanted to take it to the police. I wasn't sure. That night, we didn't sleep. Every creak of the house felt like a warning. We turned off the vent speaker. I hid the soundboard app. I unplugged everything. I started wondering if I'd crossed a line. Not with the ghost act itself, but with who else might have seen me doing it? What if I wasn't the only one sneaking around that night? What if some other neighbor watched me crawling in the dark, whispering through a vent like a deranged banshee? And worst of all, what if the person who wrote the letter wasn't from this street at all? We didn't know who we were dealing with anymore. And the Johnsons? They accepted an offer that Sunday. They're officially moving. But I have this pit in my stomach that I didn't just scare them off. I might have awoken something else entirely. The following week was a strange calm I didn't trust. For the first time in months, our street felt still. The Johnsons had a moving truck parked outside by Tuesday, and by Thursday they were gone. No goodbyes. No final confrontation. Just a hollow house with the curtains drawn and a sign out front. But that calm didn't reach inside me. Every creak in my home still made me jump. Every time the doorbell rang, I felt that chill. I kept rereading that second letter, analyzing every loop and flourish like I was in some amateur forensic show. My husband tried to laugh it off, called it a prank. He said I'd outdone myself, and maybe someone thought I deserved a taste of my own medicine. But his eyes didn't match his words. He was unsettled, too. Then the third letter came. It was taped to our back door. That's what made it different, and way scarier. Whoever left it would have had to walk into our yard. Through the gate. Past our motion-activated lights. But none of them went off. No alerts on our Ring camera. It was like they knew how to avoid being seen. The note was printed, cut from newspaper clippings like something out of a cliché ransom scene. You think you're clever. Stay quiet from now on. Ghosts aren't the only things that lurk at night. That was it. No name. No signature. Not even a date this time. Just that. I didn't tell my husband right away. I couldn't. My mind was already racing too far ahead. What if they were watching? What if they weren't bluffing? What if this wasn't about the Johnsons anymore? For a moment, I wondered if one of our other neighbors had figured it out. The woman across the street with the little garden always stared a little too long when I watered our plants. The guy 2 doors down who walks his dog at 2 a.m. What if he heard something? I was unraveling, fast. The paranoia started to affect me in real ways. I stopped going for evening walks. I closed the blinds during the day. I even muted my phone whenever I was home, just in case a sudden noise startled me into dropping it. Then my husband found the note. I'd hidden it behind the microwave, and he was rearranging some things to clean. He just stared at it for a long time. Then he turned to me and said, "You need to tell me everything." And so I did. All of it. The soundboard. The timing. The crawling across the attic space. The fake whispers. The letter. The second letter. And now the third. He listened. Quietly. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. And when I was done, he just sat back and said, "We need to move." That terrified me more than anything. Because he didn't say it out of anger. He said it like it was already too late. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding in rhythm with the silence. The house felt heavier, somehow. As if my own prank had invited something in, something I couldn't name, something that now refused to leave. The next morning, we went to the police. My husband insisted. I didn't want to. I knew how it would look, especially when I admitted I'd been pretending to be a ghost to torment our neighbors. But after seeing the third letter, he wasn't taking chances anymore. He brought all 3 with him, sealed in a Ziploc bag like evidence from a true crime documentary. The officer on duty listened politely, took some notes, and said he'd file a report. But we could both tell from his expression that he wasn't going to prioritize it. "Sounds like someone's messing with you," he said, shrugging. "Probably a teenager who saw something on TikTok." I almost laughed. TikTok. Sure. Maybe. But teenagers don't usually sneak around backyards at 3 a.m. to drop off vaguely threatening letters in total silence. We installed more cameras. Floodlights. Even a motion detector that chirped inside when anyone stepped onto our driveway. The peace didn't return. It just shifted into a different kind of fear. Now we weren't listening for the Johnsons yelling or blasting music. We were listening for footsteps. A shuffle. A scrape. I started writing everything down in a notebook. Every sound. Every unusual car that parked nearby. Every time the cameras failed to record. It was obsessive, I know, but it gave me a sense of control. Then something happened that made me realize we were in deeper than we thought. I got a package in the mail. No return address. No postage. It had just been left on our porch. Inside was a small, black notebook. It was mine, or at least it looked like mine, but it wasn't written in my handwriting. Page after page had recordings of me. Of what I'd said during the ghost noises. Of what I'd whispered through the vent. It even had times. Dates. Observations. 12:47 a.m. scraping sound, same pattern as last Monday. 1:10 a.m. female voice, distorted, electronic. Probably pre-recorded. 1:13 a.m. You need to leave. Repeated 3 times. 1:18 a.m. attic movement. Human-sized. Possibly crouching. It was me being surveilled that I dropped the notebook like it was on fire. My husband picked it up with gloves and slid it into a box. We both stood in the middle of the kitchen, afraid to even speak. I wanted to believe it was the Johnsons. That they were playing one last trick before leaving. But why would they keep tracking me after they sold the house? Unless they hadn't left at all. Unless this wasn't about the prank anymore. Unless I'd disturbed something I couldn't fix. I could feel my pulse in my throat. That black notebook wasn't just a message, it was proof someone had been watching me as closely as I'd watched the Johnsons. Every entry was unervingly detailed. I flipped to a random page and saw drawings of the chalk symbols I'd scrawled on their sidewalk. Dates. Times. My husband found me curled on the kitchen floor, trembling. I showed him the entry for last Saturday, when we'd sat on the couch talking about installing new cameras. It read exactly what we'd said, word for word. The figure behind those scribbles wasn't a kid with a phone, it was someone who knew my routines. We spent the rest of the night wide-eyed, listening to the house settle. In the morning, I called the one neighbor I befriended before all this began, the retiree across the street, Mrs. Patel. She answered right away. Her voice was kind but weary. I told her I was terrified. She told me quietly that she'd seen a shadow moving through our yard a few nights ago but had assumed it was a raccoon. I asked her to keep an eye out. She agreed, her voice breaking as she said, "I'm so sorry, dear. I didn't know." I realized then how hollow the neighborhood offer felt, the facade of quiet civility hiding the fact that none of us truly looked out for each other. That afternoon, I went into the attic and found the fishing line I'd used for my bedsheet ghost. It was cut, tangled, and stuck to an old rafter. Someone had crawled up there after me. The dread in the pit of my stomach turned into ice. I didn't know if I could stay here anymore. The neighborhood had become a cage of my own making. That night, my husband and I made a decision, we're leaving. We're going to sell this house, pack our lives into boxes, and start over somewhere else, anywhere but here. We'll trade one haunted silence for the risk of noise and strangers, because right now I'd rather have loud music or barking dogs than the feeling of invisible eyes on me. I know it sounds like I'm running away, but maybe that's exactly what I need to do, to run from the ghost I created and the one that's now following me. I have no idea who's behind this notebook or what they want. All I know is I can't stay and find out. I've already drafted a brief note to slip under the new neighbor's door when we move out, not to confess, but to warn. To whoever moves in next, watch the vents. Not all ghosts are imaginary. I'm not sure if that's brave or foolish. Maybe both. I never meant to become the villain of my own story. I just wanted peace. Instead, I got paranoia, guilt, and now a forced fresh start. But as terrifying as it feels, I'm taking control back. I can't change what I did, but I can choose where I go next. And for once, I'm choosing forward over fear. What do you think? Tell us in the comments. Like the video and hit the subscribe button for more Reddit stories.